For Ashanti people of Ghana, Anansi, the trickster, is one of the most popular and well known figures in their mythology. This cunning character holds a very important place in the folklore tales of the Ashanti people and is often seen as benevolent. Today, we'll explore the origins of Anansi in West African mythology, what he represents, and his cultural significance. It's quite difficult to determine exactly when the myths about Anansi began because the stories about him weren't written down. Instead, they were passed down orally from generation to generation. Spiders are among the most popular creatures in African tales, but Anansi is by far the most important character in these legends. It is said that he was born from the union of the almighty sky god, Naemi, and the earth goddess, Asasia. Other sources suggest that Anansi was originally a very wealthy farmer who was transformed into a spider after attempting to deceive a close friend. Anansi's physical description and story varies quite often. He is sometimes portrayed as a spider, other times as a human, or even as a mix of both. An almost human figure with several spider like traits. What rarely changes, however, is that no matter the story, Anansi always plays tricks and sets traps for those he interacts with. He always uses cunning and knowledge to achieve his goals. But as I mentioned earlier, he is generally considered benevolent because behind his pranks and tricks, there is almost always a kernel of wisdom and a lesson to be learned. There are many stories in African legends that talk about Anansi, but today we'll look at the one that is considered by many to be the most popular. This is the legend of the acquisition of wisdom and the stories of the world. In the beginning, Naemi, the sky god, was the keeper of all the stories of the world. Anansi, on the other hand, had one great wish. He desperately wanted to possess all these stories to share with them. He found the world dull and sad, seeing that people had nothing to talk about because Naomi kept all the stories locked in a box. One day, the trickster god decided to pay him a visit to see if he could persuade Naomi to sell them to him. Initially surprised by Nancy's boldness, Naomi ultimately decided to challenge him with what was considered an impossible task. To obtain all the stories Naomi possessed, Anansi had to bring him four creatures: Onani, the python, Osibo, the leopard, Maboro, the hornet, and the fairy, Moasia. Without wasting any time, Anansi set off to capture the four creatures. His first stop was to visit Onini, the python. He positioned himself outside the snake's lair and began speaking aloud, pretending to argue with himself. After a while, Ononi, curious, emerged from his hole and asked the god what he was doing. Anansi explained that his wife claimed the stick he had with him was longer than the snake, while he argued the opposite. The snake responded that perhaps it had a solution for him. It suggested that the trickster god lie down on the stick to compare their sizes. The spider then suggested to the snake that it should be tied to the stick for a more accurate measurement, and the snake agreed. As soon as the snake was tied, Anansi took it with him and brought it back to Naomi. The next creature he needed to capture was Osibo, the leopard, whose legendary strength was respected by all. Before confronting Osibo, Anansi dug a deep hole and covered it with leaves. The next morning, he found the leopard at the bottom of the hole. Seeing Anansi, Osibo begged him to help get him out. The spider then offered to weave a web all the way down so the leopard could climb up, and Osibo agreed. But as soon as he started climbing, Osibo got caught in Anansi's web, and the spider easily brought him back to the sky god. Next, to capture the hornet swarm, Anansi drilled a hole in the gourd he had with him and sprinkled water on the hornet's nest while drumming on the ground with twigs to mimic the sound of falling rain. The hornets emerged from their nest, and the spider suggested they quickly enter his gourd to escape the rain. The moment the last hornet entered the gourd, Anansi sealed the hole and handed the container to Naomi. Now, only the fairy remained to be captured. Anansi knew that Moesa loved boiled yam, so he made a bowl of it and placed the doll covered in glue next to it. Once the fairy saw the bowl, she ate it all, and when she was done, thanked the doll, which, of course, couldn't respond. Annoyed, she slapped the doll, but her hand got stuck to it. Anansi's plan had worked. He had finally caught the last of the four creatures Naomi wanted. After bringing the fairy to Naomi, the sky god gathered all the other gods and told them that Anansi had done what no one else had ever managed. Many kings and strong warriors had tried to get Naomi's stories, but no one had been able to complete his challenge. From then on, the sky god decided that Anansi had earned the right to tell the stories of the world and share them with others. Today, Anansi is still very popular in culture, and you can find him in novels like Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman and in the series American Gods, where he is shown as Mr. Nancy, a god who tells stories based on African traditions and myths. That's it for today's video about Anansi. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and share it. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave the comment below. Thanks again for following the channel. See you all soon for the next video.